It is a good day to talk hoops. Today I'm joined again by Brett Pickarts for part two. Just so you know how this works for the listeners, we have this list every time I have a guest on. We have a lot of things to get to, and the conversation's so good, we usually run out of time about halfway through the list, almost every guest we've had. So I've told everyone, I'd love to have you back and finish our conversation. And Brett took me up on it, and I'm really excited. Brett, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Excited to talk hoops, and I know we probably got through like a tenth of what we wanted to talk about last time. So excited for part two here and talking some hoops and uh, getting some hot takes out today.
Hot takes. That's exactly what we're going to do. Before we get into it, if you don't mind, I'm going to grovel. That's what you have to do with podcasts. Rate and subscribe. If you're not a podcast person, just click subscribe. It won't affect you and your day at all if you don't even use podcast apps. It helps me out, doesn't affect you. I'd be eternally grateful. Brett will probably be on a couple more times. He's expressed interest in taking this journey and talking more basketball and doing playoff previews. I'm really excited to have someone on more regularly to have more rapport with as we keep going. So what we're going to do today is I told Brett I have a bunch of hot takes that I've just been waiting to fire off and get off my chest. And I said, Brett, do you think you can get some too? And he said, yes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth with our hot takes, and we're going to rank them. 1, I don't really agree, all the way to 5. That's a really good take. I'm all about it. And we're not going to be offended if there's a 1 or a 2 in there. That's part of this process. It's a hot take because we know it's probably controversial, may not be realistic, but it's something that we could possibly see happening. So I'm going to let you kick us off, Brett.
All right, so I've scouted some games in person, actually like 3 in the last couple weeks. So we're gonna go with this. Scouting in person is extremely valuable in the year 2025 when there's a live stream of every single game in the state. I don't know a
Mm.
single school that does not have one, but I'm a big gym rat with that. So scouting in person, is it valuable? It is. I'm gonna say it is very valuable in 2025.
That is a hot take because I've coached varsity for 5 years and I went to 0 games in person.
Wow.
I went to 0 games. I was a big, like, I could watch 2 or 3 online in one night by the time you watch one in person. I had people tell me, Hunter, you can't get all the minutia, the details, the play calls, and all that stuff, which I'm going to let you explain. I'm guessing it's where you're going. But for me, I was like, I don't want to leave my family every night, and all that stuff. So you tell me what value you get out of going in person.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that's just like my coaching tree. I worked for a very good coach in Beaver Dam at Tim Ladgerin, and honestly, my wife and I, our first couple of dates were going to Buffalo Wild Wings and then going to Port Washington West Bend East game to go scout in person. So I think some of it's nostalgia a little bit for me. I like being in the gym and having like a borderline sore back where I gotta go see a chiropractor afterwards. Unfortunately, I didn't always have the tripod when I was filming. But I think there's just a lot of value. Sometimes if you bring an assistant coach too, if they have time for it, you got to be considerate of everyone's time. But if you can have an assistant coach film it and then have someone handwrite, like it's just I'm a big part of like just writing stuff down on paper. I know it's really old school, but there's a lot of things that sometimes you can't hear clearly. I like knowing exactly what teams are going to run against us, the specific set, not just knowing the action. And I think there's just a lot of value. Sometimes guys are like listed at 6'4" and they're like 5'10".
Yeah.
That's probably an exaggeration, but there's definitely a lot of 5'11" guys in the state that are probably like 5'9". So I think there's a lot of value in that. It's just kind of old school. I've burned DVDs from Walmart at like 3 a.m. when I was an assistant and I was like 20. It's part of who I am, man. I take my son now to a couple games and hopefully I foster that passion for basketball by just being around the game. But I think there's a lot of value in it. Like I do watch a lot of streams too. It's kind of a sicko move, but sometimes I have like, 6 screens up, and my wife looks at me like, why should I be married to you still? That's just a joke. But but she's like, "There's really, Brett, like 6 games? That's crazy." So, I'm a big in-person scout guy, and I'm always going to be, no matter what. So, it's just my hot take.
I do see the value in it. I'm at a 3 with that because I see value even though I didn't do it. I think so. For example, Todd Pizzori at Delavan,
Oh yeah,
he would be at every one of our games, Brett, before we played them on like Christmas break. and he would be at all of our games. And I was like, what are you doing here at all of our games? And I know like we probably played people who else they're playing, but I'll tell you what, when we played Delvin, he knew every play call and his staff knew every play call as I called it out. We actually ended up with Delvin rules where we changed our play calls before the game because, man, I'll give him credit. That was unbelievable. And I can see why that would be an extra layer. I think it is for, like you said, the sickos who are like, I love watching games and I want that A+ grade, which if you need to do that, then I think you should. I think the benefit to watching on screens is obviously just pretty much family time, gas.
Yes.
I mean, that sort of thing, which is probably why it's not super common anymore. But I see what you're saying. I think it's valuable. How many coaches do you think do it still? What percentage?
I put actually a poll up on X or Twitter or whatever people call it these days, and it was about 56-50. You know, sample size like 40 people. I'm surprised 40 people look at my Twitter, to be honest with you. But you know, it's funny you bring up Todd at Delvin Darien, dude. I can picture him like when he was at Waukesha West because I was at Cudahy and they were at a tournament. Dude, that guy is at every game, man. You're not exaggerating. If he still has that orange huddle, like
He
iPad
does.
case,
He
yeah, dude.
does.
That's the only way I can picture him. He's a great prepper, man. But yeah, I would say probably like half. I think some guys just like doing it. I think some guys
Hmm.
have a cooler office than my little spare bedroom at home that they like watching games in.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm also a big like someday I'm gonna write a book about the power rankings of high school concession stand popcorns. It's a big thing. One of the assistant coaches on our staff, he's 70, and him and I power rank popcorn when we're on the road. So some schools are out there charging 250 for it, but you know, my
That's
son, you know,
unacceptable.
you know, my son and I, you know, we enjoy that too. That's some memories I can make with him too, with him growing up in the gym and being around the game. But you know, I love being in the gym.
You've replaced the being missing from family with taking family, which I think is a big proponent of that, which is probably why it works. And I think that's something your son's gonna remember for a really long time and probably and create some sort of passion inside of him, which is really cool. I would say less than 50, man. I'd probably say 30%, a third probably, because I just don't remember seeing many coaches other than Todd at our games. Especially in the
Oh, that's
winter in
good.
Wisconsin, man, where
Yeah.
it's like it's tough to want to get out.
Yeah, there's a reason why my car's got like 210,000 miles on it. Like I can probably name like instances on Highway 41 where I was scouting. We played Kimberly when I was at Beaver Dam and I was in charge of that scout. And I can probably I say I've been at every quick trip on Highway 41 or Interstate 41 coming up here. So yeah, it's something I'm really passionate about. It's just part of who I am, you know. And
Yep.
my coaching tree. I think a lot of guys in that coaching tree also do that.
Yep. So here's my first one. I don't know how it's going to be received. I really don't. I could see someone strongly disagreeing. I could see someone agreeing with it. I don't believe in calling timeouts in the first three quarters unless you have to majorly change something you're doing. I don't believe in a 7 point run timeout. I don't believe in a matchup timeout that you can't just yell out on the court. I don't believe in a get a water timeout. I thought my strategy was I'm taking as many to the fourth quarter as I can because a loose ball in the first quarter is not nearly as much valuable as a stop clock in a 2 point game in the fourth quarter. Where do you stand on that take?
So I would say a two. I actually like using. I actually scripted a lot of timeouts like at certain points, almost every game, where my players figured out when are you going to call your halfway half timeout here. So I like calling timeouts in that purpose, and I would say a little bit kind of more of your out of the box thinking is I like calling timeouts when guys are really playing well, and they just need to hear that. I think coaches though overcomplicate timeouts. Like you know, if you watch games in the Big East or Big Ten or whatever, those guys are you might have Hurley drawing up crazy sets, but for the most part, it's just cultural things. And so in that aspect, I think it is overrated a little bit with taking timeouts. But I always like calling a timeout around, it's an 18-minute half, around 10 minutes,
Yeah.
pretty consistently. And I will say I never used all my timeouts ever.
Huh.
So I can totally understand what you're saying. The loose ball in the first 2 minutes probably doesn't matter, especially when you have the possession arrow. But I'd probably be at a two at that just because I like calling a timeout, not to like yell at guys or whatever, just get them calm and reinforce the cultural standard. We were a switching team when I was at Waupun. hey, we're not switching screens well enough, or we're not grinding out a couple of possessions here, and that was part of our game plan, or we're letting this guy, it's like scout stuff that we went over a bunch, and like just reinforcing those expectations. So I'm not completely opposed to that, but I think some of my timeouts are a little more out of the box, like
Yeah,
more what guys need. Because how much are kids processing if you say 10 things in a timeout?
they're
They're
not.
not.
They're
You know,
not. And my big thing, Brett, was if there was something I could correct on
right?
the court, I was not going to call a timeout for that. I was not. I've watched a ton of games this year online, and I've seen several coaches who will just flippantly call them and enter the last 5 minutes with one, maybe two. And I don't even believe in this is one of my biggest hot takes. Maybe I don't even believe in a stop the run timeout where sometimes I truly believe when I watch the games back and early on when I did do it, it allowed the team that went on the run to like get super jacked up because that's when it almost clicks with them that they have you on the ropes is when you call that timeout. As they're walking to the crowd waving their hands up, I get the psychology behind stopping momentum and I understand that's probably more scientific. I felt like so I didn't, and I found success with it. And maybe it's because a special group of kids I had that could rally, and that's maybe more of leadership training and specific personality coaching than that specific timeouts or no timeouts. But I just wanted as many for the close game moments as possible. And I can give one quick example before we move to your next hot take. I remember last year there was a moment in the game with like 2 minutes left in the half. And I'd used one for a major correction, like I said, so we're like talking about like we were switching, we're not going to switch, or we were running curl cuts, now we're going to get some more spacing. I think that's appropriate, right? And my assistant yelled, "Coach, coach, coach, timeout!" And I said, "I respect you, but we're good. Trust me." We ended up being good, and then the second half, the very first play of the second half, we came out lethargic and didn't do exactly what I thought, what I drew up on the board to do timeout right away. And we fixed it. And we came out guns a-blazing. He goes, "That's why I'm an assistant. Good call." But I was like, it's not that it was a bad idea on your end. It's that I just want as many for that second half as possible. Because the first half is such a random smorgasbord. So you can respond with any lingering thoughts you have on that. And then you can go straight into your
Yeah.
second one from there.
So I guess kind of listening to hear you say that too is a regional final game. My first year, we were really fortunate to have some really awesome kids in that program that were super intelligent, and we had practice and we talked a little bit of end of game situations last time, and we had a timeout left. And when they made a free throw, I know for a fact because I've talked to this coach about it. They thought we were going to call a timeout. I called we fouled. We were up three, and we fouled before we weren't supposed to foul, and the guy was in the act of the shooting. So long story short, he made his first free throw. He missed his second. So I called a timeout. I'm like, guys, he's a 90% 3-point or free throw shooter. He's probably going to make this. They're going to expect that we're going to call a timeout. We're running our game-winning set and get the ball and inbound. And there's some guys like, no, we should call a timeout. I'm like, just trust me, like. And you can kind of see in that video, and some of their guys stopped running because they thought we were calling a timeout. So I can see that aspect of, like being like, well, they got to call a timeout. They're on a 20-0 run. I'm never going to be like that because if you're on a 20-0 run, then there's something that I need to adjust, But I think that's a really an extreme example. But an example where a team thought we were going to call a timeout, we kind of had a pretty legendary moment in my coaching and career and just in my memory bank, the full court pass for a layup to win. So going into my next topic, speaking of big games, one I just put out here a couple hours ago, but all conference games in the state of Wisconsin should be a boys-girls doubleheader.
That's really unique. That's really unique. Man, I almost need a minute to think about that one. So let's clarify. Is JV still happening?
Yes, they might be in a middle school gym or just playing a little bit earlier. But yes, JV2 is still going on.
I do like that. I wonder how that would logistically work. I remember at the Classic 8 when I was at Oconomowoc, the boys and girls played every conference game the same night, but home and away. So kids could not go support both. In the Rock Valley, we did not have that, and it was relatively easy for them to support both. We might have a non-conference crossover with a conference game from the other. So I I do like the atmosphere. I've seen the boys girls back to backers, and it's a really good atmosphere. A lot of people are there, so I can support it. I'm a four. I think it would have problems logistically working, but I like the idea. So tell me why you thought that.
So two big reasons why I thought this. Number one, if anyone was not aware and probably should be aware, we have a reffing shortage, and I don't think uh, out of the question necessarily if a ref crew came in. I don't think they'd be opposed to doing a back to back with like a half an hour break, just
Yeah,
personally speaking. And number two, kind of for that same reason, you're not splitting fans. Like we have a new conference commissioner in our conference this year, and we have way more games than the girls. And sometimes they have 5 fans and we have 15.
hmm,
It's really tough. Or we have some siblings, and their parents have to pick which game they want to go to. We did a doubleheader this year with Clintonville, which is just up the road from us, and we both of our programs won, but there's still a lot of people there, and I think you can. I've been very pro community events, and I think this would be something if you could figure out what time to start without having the bus sit there for 7 hours. I think it would be really helpful. Like we rode the bus with our girls team, both programs, and now that's not going to be possible maybe at all D1 schools because they have 60 kids in their program. But I think it's just when you create community events, I think it's a positive, and we're really struggling to find officials. Like we're in the central
yeah,
part of the state, and we've had the same crew 6 times this year, and
wow,
that's tough. And we have some awesome officials up here, but I think just creating community events, like I'm a five, obviously I'm on a five on this one. I just think it would be really cool and special for the kids to have more packed gyms. Not every school is going to be like the Fox River Classic, where like Ashwaubenon and De Pere, where it's two really great players battling it out. We're a good program and have a great tradition, but it's tough when you're splitting communities, man. I think that's a good way to keep the older people in the community involved in something and feel attached to it because they get to see the boys and the girls at the same time.
it does help that a lot. I think it helps the ref issue a lot. And I think that a big concern I had a couple of years ago was what are we going to do when all these old refs stop refing? What's happening? Because anyone will tell you. I was on the Wisconsin Officials Association podcast 2 weeks ago as a guest, and they're talking about the age of the refs, and it's ridiculous. It's like mid 50s, upper 50s is the average age. And what are you going to do when they all leave? That's an option. Moving freshman games, JV2 in Wisconsin to another night's an option. I know in Illinois, freshmen played a separate schedule than JV and varsity, so it allow some different overlap. I do like it because it's all positive. What's the negative? Well, it's a huge event for a school to run probably once a week for a
For
while.
sure.
Is that outweigh the good? I don't think so. So I do think you're onto something with that. Do I think it will happen? No, but I think it's something that people should consider, especially if the refs are still in a bit of a shortage. So I'm with you on that. I think it would be super positive in a very unique situation. Um, for the sake of time, I'm going to go into my number two. I think a lot of people have their opinions of stats and what's the worst stat. There's points per possession everyone loves. My least favorite will surprise people and is assists. And here's why. It's not because I'm anti-pass. People who play pickup with me would say otherwise. But um, if you make a bad pass and you kind of fumble it to someone and he makes a great, crazy shot, that's an assist. If I make a great pass, I drive to traffic, draw your man, kick out straight into the shooter's hands, and he misses a shot, no assist. And that drives me crazy. And there's no other way to quantify it, and I get it. But Brett, there's no way people should get rewarded for a ball bouncing off their hip into someone's hands and they make a hook shot layup as opposed to the people who are making great passes and missing shots. Where are you at on that?
I'm about a 3. I can't stand when you see a highlight tape from a high school kid and it's a ball reversal. It's like that's plays that are expected at the next level, man. Like if that's making the highlight clip, I don't really want to hear that you average 5 assists a game, man. Like and we had really good ball reversers, and some of the places I've coached, and the one more pass is valuable. But I'd say I'm like a 3, just because I think there's some really good passers that don't score. a lot, and I don't really know how else you recognize them, and I think it's important to recognize them for something. If they, the guys that can't shoot and only score layups, there's a couple of those guys that are really good players. I can think of quite a few guys just around the state. So I'm like at a 3 because I totally agree. If you make like just like a random pass and the guy makes a crazy layup, should we really be rewarding that? So. And I know you had Coach Fitzgerald on about it, but my favorite stat is points per possession. Looking at that, so that's my favorite stat. We don't have to go too much into that because I think it's more valuable. And I also think one of my least favorite stats is plus minus, like because there's sometimes no context. And again, you talk about that with Coach Fitzgerald a little bit. Like a guy could be cooking and over in garbage time and have a great plus minus while you're if you're a 500 program and you have a couple bad games, your best player is going to have a lousy plus minus. And so, yeah, I think assists could be argued as a top 5 worst stat, though, for sure.
As I'm saying it, I'm not out of 5 on my own takes. I don't know what the solution is, but it's almost like I wish there was a stat to where if someone was guarding you, how many times you made a pass to someone that hit them in the hands. Like it's a good pass. You didn't jump, fade. They didn't have to jump, fade for it, bend over for it, hit them where their hands were in their pocket. I'm watching film and I look at Wiz Sports and I see that this player has so many assists a game, and then I look at it and he's making a transition pass and a player does like a euro, makes a layup, where it's like, well, you just outletted. You didn't do anything that great. And then I'll see a kid in a dribble drive. He'll drive, draw the defender, get a good angle, solid pass into the hands of a corner shooter, and he'll clank the shot. And it's like, well, no one will ever see that again, or is that recognized? I'm not a huge fan of assist turnover ratio on Huddle because Huddle screws up the turnovers so much, and I'm not the assists I could give or take in this reality. So that's that one for me. I'm gonna let you go to number 3.
Yeah, all right. Another one here. Traveling outside of 25 miles before 6th grade for youth tournaments is unnecessary.
5. I don't even need an explanation. I'm gonna let you have it, but I'm gonna just tell you right now I can be a 6.
I'm like at a 10 out of 5 on this one. So, I grew up in Janesville and we had the YMCA. I know like YMCA ball is not always a thing in every community now, especially the smaller communities that don't have a YMCA. But I officiate a lot. I'm officiating a game this Saturday and a couple games this Saturday. And I know we're going to have those scores that are 10-6 from a team that's coming from 50 miles away. And it just, I know youth sports have become super organized in the last 20 years, but it sounds like get off my lawn takes, but there's nothing wrong with just getting shots up in your driveway until you're like in 5th grade or even 6th grade. Because really, what are you getting out of that? You might have that kid that grows like to be 6 foot and is like a 6 foot post player in 6th grade that just dominates. Even then, but you can be a varsity basketball player. And I'm 31 now, but I didn't play travel ball my 8th grade year. I just wanted to do swimming and different sports in the middle school level because I just felt like burnt out playing 50 games, man. And that was 20 years ago that was happening. And I think kids are just burned out. They just want the casual basketball player just doesn't exist anymore at a lot of schools. It just they get burnt out from playing hundreds of games, And if you look at the Euro model, which I know we could talk about for hours, but they don't play on 10-foot hoops until they're 13 years old, and we expect little 8-year-olds to use all their body power to shoot on a 10-foot hoop just so their parents can feel good that they won 6-4 and won a trophy, man. I don't think that's that hot of a take with head coaches, but I think it would be a hotter take when you're talking about Jimmy that would have been a superstar if his coach would have put him in and is trying to live through his kid now.
It is, though. It is with parents. It is because they think it is necessary. And it's a problem because you're taking families and you're splitting them up at an early age, right? So you're having dad and oldest son go to games 3 hours away for the weekend, and mom and youngest daughter go to her games 3 hours away. That family, that time is adding up. And in a society right now where we're having really poor leadership and really poor behavior and really poor morals, you're removing parents away from parenting and family bonding time and dinners and lunch. And this is coming from guys who coach for a profession telling you that you don't really need AAU unless you're a recruitable player. I'll reiterate that until I'm blue in the face. AAU is for people who are recruitable, that are probably going to have a chance to play at the next level. You can play in it to grow your game in high school and learn how to play together with a team and all those things. But what the players in the NBA players in the 90s, how did they get good? Even early 2000s before AAU, how did they get good? They didn't have AAU. So there's clearly that's not the reason you got good. So I think that's kind of a blended hot take that I have with it, is that AAU isn't necessary at all through elementary and middle school. If anything, you can learn how to play. Maybe you're in a town with a really poor talent pool and you're not getting challenged at all and you need to grow your game by playing more talented people. I could see someone saying that and agree with them on that side. But you
Yeah.
shouldn't be traveling every single weekend. I talk to my colleague about this all the time, and it's clearly a passion point for me that you can get really good at basketball without traveling 3 states away and paying $10,000 a summer.
No, absolutely, man. It's the evaporation of family time. I ask some of my, kids that I work with or coaching and teaching, like, how many of you sit down with your family for dinner? And it's like 0. It's crazy to me. But they're running the hockey at 9 o'clock. It's not a dig on hockey because ice time is crazy limited for those kids. But it's just like, or even basketball practice, they practice at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night because this is what the gym is available for. It's tough, man. Like, and so I'm very pro family. And one quick thing to wrap this topic up is like, I was coaching in Milwaukee area at a school, and I had this AU coach. Like, we have this elite 3rd grade team. Do you want to coach? Like, you're a good coach. What does that even mean, man? Elite 3rd grade team? No, I don't. I'm not interested in making $500 to coach probably some weird families that think their kids going to the NBA when they're 8. That's just not what I'm about. Now I coach AU, and for one of my former coaches I worked with, his son now, who I remember him when he was 9, and that's that's special for me. And working with some of those kids, and we have great kids in that program. And I'm honest with them, like, D2, D3, maybe, man. And that's if you work really hard outside of what we do here. We have a great system with Heart of the Valley. It's like 2 games or 3 games and on a Saturday, and it's like 5 weeks and it's done. I'm not really anti that because it's hard to do in-house at smaller schools. But
Yep.
I think the parents that travel long ways, like, consistently, it's just not right for and what's best for kids or families.
Yep. I 100% agree. You're not even just talking basketball. They're assuming they're probably playing other sports. Baseball is traveling all summer. Soccer's traveling almost all year round now. Volleyball's traveling year round now. Football is probably one of the few that's not. And you're really piling up responsibilities. You can get better and it can be a tool, but it is not going to make your kid a superstar. Con Knipple was not made a superstar because he played on an AAU team. He worked his tail off, probably thousands of hours to get to where he's at. And then he got recruited through AAU and high school basketball and stuff. So like I said, if you're a recruitable player, even if it's community college, and yeah, absolutely, you can't be seen. Mark Miller was one of my guests. He told me you cannot be seen by head coaches unless you're playing AAU because you're during their season. So it's got to be an option for you. And if that's your wheelhouse or your potential future, then yes, do it. But if you are not even starting in the trailways, I mean, come on.
Right, exactly. That's not there's some great trailways players, but I mean, seriously though, it's a huge difference of the game, man. The reality is like 1% of kids play college basketball, and also don't understand what it takes to play college basketball. And the adults that lie to them, like, oh, we're going to this elite tournament, man. Like, great. What does that mean?
Yeah, and someone might say, well, you don't want them to play then? No, I do. Play local. Get 3-on-3 leagues. Travel 20 miles, like you said. That's reasonable. That's perfectly fine. You're not wasting your money, and you're not missing out on family time your whole entire childhood. My take 3 is a tepid take. It's not a hot take, so I do think it's reasonable, but I don't think it's going to happen. So it's somewhere between a hot and a cold take. School day should be an hour shorter. That last hour should be for sports activities. I've been a teacher. I know how much time keeps getting added and duties getting added, and we keep adding and adding, not taking away. So we add a homeroom full of guidance now, and you have to do your career planning, and then we do guided study halls and all these things. And then we go, why aren't more kids doing clubs and sports? Why can't we field a basketball team this year? Well, you're piling on things and you're not taking anything away. And that's not how life works. So my take is school day should be an hour shorter. Homeschools do their day in a half a day. So it's possible to learn the material and be prepared for college in a less time. And that would allow you to start your practices an hour early.
I'm gonna go a 4.5 on that because the half is just because I know it's probably never gonna happen. But it's super helpful, man. The elite schools around Lake Country, like I know you worked at Oconomowoc, like they have lifting built into their day now for all their athletes, and that's a really big positive for their athletic programs and just in general, like healthy lifestyles, like. Lifting weights and being physically fit is something that's part of physical and mental health. That's something that's very important, to be exercising and to that nature. It goes back to my family argument, man. Like, if you have practice at 2:30 versus 5:30 because of the gym, you got one court. It's gonna help kids, and that's what's best for kids. I think going back and thinking about that, I think having one game during the school day would be crazy. Having the whole school there would be awesome. Those teachers for staff games. I had one my first year teaching. I just remember that was so much fun looking like little seventh graders at my middle school. But I think it'd be really cool to have a whole school event like that, and not just for basketball, but like volleyball or a day where you have a May picnic and go to watch a softball game for your high school, or you go support the soccer team. I think it'd be fun. I don't know if you could do every sport. I think it'd be easier for the inside part of it, but anytime you can get more time for family and kids work, man. Like some of the kids have to work to support their family. Like I'd say probably half the kids I've coached in the last 10 years have a job, work at Quick Trip or officiate or work on a farm, man. Like that's just what they do. And I think and that doesn't even like include like their school responsibilities. Like,
Right.
I've been at schools that have really strong academics and really good students. Like they're in AP classes, man. They got to study. So I'm 4.5 on that. That just the half
I have a super easy solution that you cut like 15 minutes out of homeroom. It's not super necessary. I've seen it, I've done it. And then you make that a PE credit. And if you're not in a sport or a club or something like that, then you have to do the 8th hour and it's a PE maybe for them or something like that. But why can't you being in a sport be a PE credit? That is it just
doesn't make any sense.
There's so many things that we overthink for the sake of policy, and it's an easy fix for me. That's the eighth period. If you're an 8 period day, is sports club hour, whatever you want to call it. And if you're in it, you get a PE credit. If not, you have to take PE when the first 7 periods and you have a class 8. Teachers go home after 8th. Coaches can start their practices in that 8th hour. They go on through the day. So if someone asks me, how's that possible? I feel like it is possible.
Yeah, I mean, you got to find creative ways to increase participation numbers, man. They're lagging in like 95% of schools, man. And, studies show kids that are more involved and connected in athletics, clubs, sports, organizations are more likely to be successful in life and understand, how to communicate which is something that our society lacks is communication skills and just how to be a good person, man. When you're involved with adults that are vetted and, probably making 5 cents an hour, like, dedicating their time to improving the life of youth. It's important, and those kids will see that that you care. So anytime you can get kids more involved with things, it's super important.
Give me
All
number
right.
4.
All right. This one's kind of a hot take. Recruiting rankings with sports or prep hoops. Rankings should not be established until their junior year of high school.
I think you're in a good place, and I think you're going to have pure motivations on your explanation. I think rankings are the bread and butter of the content industry. So what are your reasons before I react?
Not to go to, it's not a trailways thing, but the kids at smaller schools are going to excel and get to 1,000 points faster than the kids that are on JV for Nina, Kimberly. Those kids are not going to be seen until they get there. They're not going to be 4-year varsity players unless you are an elite athlete. the Donovan Davises of the world that would be good at any school. So I I am not I'm very anti rankings culture. I think kids spend way too much time focused on that, hyper focused that. And outside of the top 25, I don't think it really matters anyways. It's just kind of throwing darts at a dartboard. A lot of the guys, and it's not any, they got to do their jobs and make content and support their families, but a lot of times they just ask coaches who's good in the area. And that's not anyone specific. That's everyone. I had guys this summer at AU ask me like, who's your best player without even watching me, and they'd write an article. And I'm glad that kid's getting publicity, but is that the most honest way to rank kids then, man? So I'm not like anti like AU in high school. I am for a lot of kids that are just playing to play. Or like team camps. I worked the full disclosure, like I worked the Viterbo exposure camp for Mark Miller every summer because it's an awesome experience for the kids. And they get to meet new people from around the state. I think events like that are great, but I don't know if they need to be ranked like right away. I think it just puts a lot of pressure on them that they're already getting from social media. Every high school now, even D5s, got a guy in the baseline trying to make content for Instagram Reels and TikTok. It's a reality, man. Like we played Ashwaubenon, they got Amari Allen who's going to Bama, and they beat us by 35. They're a good team. It's not a slight on those kids, but I don't know if we need to make content and rank kids. They're not even adults, man. Then what are you teaching them? That doing something outlandish or just who you are as a basketball player is the only thing that matters. And so, and I remember being a kid. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I'm friends with Mark Miller now. And I'm like, man, what do I get? I always thought to myself as a kid, like I play in the Big Eight at Janesville Craig, and I average 11 points a game, which was not anything special. What do I got to do to get on those rankings? And just even me, like growing up in an era where social media was not more prevalent, I was worried about that. And it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. If you're good enough to play at the next level, and you play, at events or whatever, it may be a good team camp, you're going to get recruited. And so I just don't think it
Yeah.
matters when you're still developing. And I guess that's where my take is with that.
Yeah, I think the reason for the list is not the rankings itself, it's the content traffic it drives. I think every media platform, if I turn on a sports show, they're doing power rankings, some sort of hierarchy, some sort of greatness rankings, Mount Rushmore draft regularly because putting a number next to something drives traffic. So I do think there is a pseudo value to it that won't go away. But I do agree with you in the way it's processed is not great because I'll give you an example. I had a freshman start for me one year, and he would have never started anywhere else, to be honest with you. And I liked him. We needed somebody, and he was that somebody. So he got ranked in the top 50 that year. And I was like, huh. And he's excited about it. I'm telling my assistants, I'm like, that's interesting. He's not very good. And he did not make the ranking his sophomore year, the next years as well. And the problem was, like you said, is that the small schools, these kids start right away when they'd be JV1 or even JV2 at the bigger schools. So they get ranking because you're averaging 6 points a game on varsity as a freshman. We got to find a list of 50 kids. So if anyone's got a stat that's even somewhat okay, they're probably making that freshman year list. Sophomore year, I could get behind because you at least have a year's worth of evidence. You have a year's worth of growth. So I can envision that. I'm 100% out on anything before high school. 1,000% out. I think that's destructive. I think that ruins more careers than it creates. But there's too many people like me. There's too many grandpas, dads that click on it. that it's sports, and it does drive a lot of angst among the kids.
Yeah, man, and I'm a With Sports and Prep Hoop subscriber, and I bought Mark's yearbook for 17 years, man. Like I've got it since I was a freshman in high school. So like I kind of probably feed into that problem, and I like reading about that because it's just not. I think if the local newspaper wasn't dying, I think that would be helpful. I mean, just remember you look at a box score or whatever, and that was enough, content because they would write a story on things, and the local journalism is kind of dying a little bit. There's some good organizations like Zaleski Sports that cover a lot of high school events, prep hoops with sports, and there's a ton more. Like local stations. We had Radio Plus with some great radio announcers that I can go look back on YouTube now and watch some of those games. And have those moments for the kids, but. I think the ranking culture and the comparison and the debate culture, as we're giving hot takes right now,
Yeah.
but I think just like everyone's got to have an opinion on something, and I like reading that stuff, but I always take it with a grain of salt, which some people just don't. Like, oh, that kid's top 10 when he's a
I
freshman.
think in today's
Great,
culture that's a hot take.
yeah,
I do. I think in today's culture that very well is a hot take because people love those things because I think they can associate and make their own list and argue it as opposed to an article on the dribble drive offense. Nobody can really
right.
share their opinions unless they understand it, but a list of the best 10 players that I can make that list in my sleep, and guy who watches no games can make that list as well. And I think that drives it. So I think your heart's in the right place because you're saying let's protect the youth. Let's protect their mentality. Let's protect their self-esteem, their confidence. And you can't go wrong doing that. I do, to Mark's credit, he never ranks anyone poorly. Like, he never gives a bad review. He never says this guy was a bad shooter or this guy was worse than I thought. So there is some tact that he takes that I don't think every recruiting service does take. I did want to get to my last one here as we're winding down. And my last one's a flaming hot one as opposed to the tepid take I had last time. High school basketball games would surpass college and NBA viewership ratings if the head coach was allowed to play one quarter of every game. Any quarter, it doesn't matter if you're in a half system, it's a quarter stretch. The head coach gets to play one quarter of every game. I think people around the world would watch in amazement, and it would drive ratings through the roof.
So it's like like Mike, right? Calvin Cambridge. I don't. That probably really dates me. It's like the anti like Mike. I think there'd be some interesting hires. There'd probably be some really good players. For me, probably my early 20s, I would have probably went like a 4 with this, just because I was in a little better shape and running half marathons and stuff. But I'll go 3.5 with this because I think there would be some pretty good players, man. I'd also be like very entertaining just knowing some of the guys and how many chicken fingers they eat on the state tournament weekend, like what kind of condition their bodies are in. I think that'd be very funny. Sometimes I jump into a shooting drill at practice and they're like, there's no way you were a 40% 3-point shooter in high school. And I said, dude, I was. Like, it's not it anymore. You'll get it when you have kids and you turn 30, man. It's still young, but you'll get it. So I think it'd be very interesting. I think back to who was that Kettle Moraine before Coach Ricker with Trayvon Hughes. He's a pretty
Trayvon
good
Hughes.
player. Yeah, he's pretty good. So I think there'd be some crazy, like, talented high school coaches. Be interesting strategy wise, how guys would adjust. Like, what quarter are you going to play? You're going to come out in the first quarter and just, score 50 straight points. For me right now in a high school game, and I'll
Yeah.
ask you the same question, I probably put up maybe 10 points. Maybe. I don't know. I think I've maybe
So
scored 10 points in a high school game right now. At the most. At the most.
I'll tell you what, man. So the reason I thought of this is the kids used to ask me how many could you drop in a game, and we would have a good time talking about it. And since I left coaching, I've been able to exercise daily and play in a men's league. And now I'm in the best shape I've ever been in, as opposed to when I was coaching. I
Oh,
was
that's
actually
great.
in way worse shape. I think it would change the hiring process because do you hire someone who's good or a really good coach? And does the coach chuck the whole time, or does he have to manage his players hating him for being a ball hog? There's so many dynamics. Guys dunking on each other. I think it would be hilarious and also awe-inspiring. I think it would line the court with spectators and it would do massive ratings. And you mentioned Trayvon Hughes. When I moved to Oconomowoc, I was not from Wisconsin. I was from Southern Illinois. So I go to the Y and I'm playing pickup at the Y. And this guy picks me up full court. And I was like, who is this guy? And he's like hounding me. And then he gets a steal and he takes 2 dribbles from half court and shoots a layup. And then he's shooting volleyball line threes. And I was like, who is this guy? And they're like, dude, that's Trayvon Hughes. And I was like, who's that? And so I got a full history on Trayvon Hughes from University of Wisconsin and his Hall of Fame worthy college career. And I was like, I know who that is now. And like a guy like that, you're talking a quarter of play. He's probably scoring 30 points at least in that quarter.
I mean, there's guys, like I'll talk about Coach AO, Alex Olson. He still plays in men's leagues, dude. He could put up 50. Like, there are some guys that play at WEAC schools. WEAC is the best D3 conference in the country that, like, you can't argue with me. There's like 5, 6, 7 teams that are really good every year. I know Coach Olson, man, like, he can get buckets still. Like, he's got an absolute flame. He plays that closed gyms runs. He's always in those box scores, man, putting up like 40, 50 a game. Maybe if I ever stop coaching, I'll get in a little bit better shape. But I think Quick Trip just rubs their hands together during the months of November, December, January, February, because they're getting every coach and their brother and sister going there at the hot spot because that they don't want to make something like a salad at 9 p.m. after scouting or coaching a basketball game.
There's nothing better than finding a good men's run. And I never had because, as you're coaching, you're working your 8 to 3 or 7 to 3, whatever your school hours are. And then you're coaching and then you're exhausted. You go home, eat dinner, go to sleep. Where now I have all this time and it's electric, man. I feel like a kid again. I miss coaching. I miss the competition, but getting to play again, man, that's a feeling I haven't had in a while. It's been really fun. I think it would be really funny to play a team like Edgerton and then strap up against Daryl Fox. And, I think we might finally get Edgerton a few times if that was the case. But I just think having conversations with the kids like that is something, Brett, I do miss a lot because, we'd talk about which coaching staff would win games or joke about how many we could score. And those conversations in the bleachers during JV games in the locker room, that's the stuff I really miss. And doing this now kind of supplements that a little bit for me. But I would say that is a sweet part of coaching that I hope people listening understand that you can't really recreate in many avenues in life is those relationships. So anything from you, Brett, before we sign off here?
No, man, thanks for having me on. Anytime you can highlight high school hoops and just coaches, there's so many unbelievable coaches in the state of Wisconsin. I listen to every podcast and, Coach Fitzgerald, hearing his story about JUCO and coaching at UW Milwaukee and all those schools. Like, there's just so many talented guys, and I'm just very fortunate that you keep having me on. I don't know why all the time, but our conversation are awesome, and I appreciate the time and anyone who's listening, and it's a great. Anytime we can highlight high school hoops, I still think it's the best form of basketball. March Madness you can make an argument for, but I think high school hoops is the purest form of the game in terms of what basketball is about, which is relationships, life lessons, and respecting your opponent, even in the heat of the battle. I think high school hoops is the best form of basketball. And so I appreciate you having me on again, and hopefully this is not the last time. I know maybe we got some things coming up that we can talk about, but yeah, I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. It was definitely a very much a missing proponent of coverage. You have all these people coming out of nowhere making Instagram accounts and Twitter accounts and doing all the there's enough of that. There's too much. There's not enough space for that, but there's no one bringing coaches on and giving them a voice and almost representing coaches publicly as well and spreading the good news about things that are going on and pass along that information. So that's the heart behind wanting to do this. And podcasting's hard. I don't know if people realize. I want you to focus on how many times in your conversation you use the words like, cool, and try eliminating all those words from your vocabulary. And it is difficult. It is a hard thing to do. So I respect my guests who come on and just try to figure it out as they go. Cause I'm at 15 episodes deep and these people coming on their first time and they're trying to do their best. And I'm super grateful for everyone coming on. So I'm super grateful, Brett. I'm appreciative of you. Again, if you can like and subscribe to the podcast, I would appreciate it. Next week we have Jake Stewart coming on. Jake and I are from the same hometown. We grew up playing ball together, and he is now one of the best coaches in Illinois high school basketball. And he's a girls coach, and it's about time we had a girls coach on. So I'm excited. I will see you all next week.